30 years is a long time to do anything. I've been playing trading card games for 3 decades now, not casually opening packs, not just collecting, actually sitting down with other people playing, building decks, traveling to events, losing with decks, losing at events, losing while playing, testing metas, reading articles about metas, reading websites, talking to people, watching formats and games rise, collapse, come back again. I started with Star Wars CCG in the mid 1990s. I played Star Trek CCG and also Lord of the Rings CCG, which were all published by an organization called Decipher, which no longer exists. When my daughter showed an interest, I started playing Pokemon TCG. I've come back to that recently. I've played Star Wars Unlimited, which is by a company called Final Fantasy Flight, FFG, Fantasy Flight Games. And I've been playing that for roughly the last 18 months. Different publishers, different mechanics, different communities, different games, all very nerdy. Star Trek, Star Wars, Lord of the Rings, Pokemon. None of it's exactly within the realm of sort of relative socially acceptable things. I'm talking on a channel that talks about selling pieces of cardboard with people's pictures on them. So I'm not all that fussed about that. That's just part of who I am. But it's the same economic patterns, right? And if you're primarily a collector, so if you're coming this from a sports card background, understanding how TCGs actually function on the playing side can change the way you look at card value completely. Because the biggest thing I think I've learned looking on both sides of this particular coin is that the market for playable cards is not the same as the market for collectible cards. And when you misunderstand the two, then you misunderstand the value that some cards can have, right? Because when you're a competitive player, even if you're a bad competitive player like me, you don't worry or ask whether or not a card is rare. You don't ask whether it grades well. You don't even really care all that much whether it looks nice. Now, these are things that, and we'll get into this, that some people have opinions on. Okay. The art on this is good or bad. The picture on this is good or bad. This is a great looking card. But ultimately, you ask one question and one question that matters only, which is this card going to win me a game? Okay. If the card is going to win you games, then demand appears instantly, not slowly, not sort of gradually, just instantly, right? One tournament result, the big enough tournament result can change everything. If a deck wins a major event, so and obviously it changes game to game. If a big personality, a key player, is using a card and highlighting a card, and that key card is shown to be essential, every serious player now needs three, four, sometimes more copies. And that's immediate pressure on the supply that exists in the market. And that's why two things happen. Playable cards can spike violently, but it's also why players might not talk to you. Because as a collector, if you're collecting something because the art looks good and it's a highly playable card, and that's pricing people out of the market, and you see this in particular with games like Magic, Pokemon. I used to find this with Star Wars CCG in the 90s. They see a direct link between the frustration of not being able to play the game the way they want and you taking those cards out of circulation. Okay. What 30 years has taught me is that that demand is conditional, though. All right. That demand for those powerful cards only exists while a card remains powerful. Now, there's a thing in trading card games which is called rotation, which is that cards are no longer able to be played in tournaments. So a card is in demand and powerful, and then it's no longer in demand, it's no longer powerful because you can't play it. Or sometimes a counter deck emerges, or a stronger card gets printed, or a card gets banned, and that demand collapses just as fast as it appeared. I've seen staple cards, cards that everybody wanted and needed that can cost 20, £30, go from absolutely essential to binder fodder in less than a year, sometimes faster. It's about to happen with Pokemon. So if you're holding on to Pidgeot EX or Pidgeots because you like the art, they are about to most likely, I think, drop in price because they are essential in a lot of decks that are quite powerful, and they are going to be unplayable in standard format in 2 months. Okay, likewise, Star Wars Unlimited, so less of a money game. Cards like Darth Vader, a card like Boba Fett was incredibly popular, 30, £35 per single. Then it got banned. Now it's not worth anything. Okay. So from the outside, though, A collector might look at a £50 playable card and think, wow, this must be rare, this must be important, this must be in high demand. Often it's not rare at all, though. It's just necessary right now. So people, looking at that Boba Fett example, people might look at Boba Fett and go, oh my God, he's a very popular character within Star Wars. He must be very, very important, must be very, very rare. But, I'll buy up a bunch of these and then flip them. No, it's that he was a broken card. He was ridiculously overpowered within the game, or he fit within a broken deck. That deck got banned, no longer desirable. The market's no longer there. You can't make the money off it. And that's a different kind of value, right? As a player, you learn that that competitive demand, it's ruthless, it's temporary. Players are loyal to winning, not to cardboard or to art. Some players are loyal to particular characters, but generally speaking, collectors operate on a completely different timeline. Okay. Collectors think in times of years, sometimes in terms of, so I've been thinking recently, buying a little bit of wax, thinking more in terms of 5, 10 years, sometimes decades, right? Thinking about scarcity curves and cultural relevance and the importance of condition and character and population reports and all these kinds of things. But the player in me sees a tool. Okay. Whereas the collector in me sees an asset, right? Neither of these perspectives is wrong, but they create different price behaviors, right? So competitive players create spikes, whereas collectors tend to create floors. And when I look back at the games that I've played, so Star Wars or Star Trek, Lord of the Rings, Pokemon, the same pattern repeats again and again and again, right? Because there are 3 types of value in the hobby as far as I see it. There's a utility value, which is how good the card is within the rules of the game. There's the scarcity value, which is how hard it is to obtain. And there's the emotional value. So that's how much people care about what the card represents, whether it's a character or a type of art. Thinking of Moonbryon or things like that. That is the exact same card. You can get that exact same card incredibly cheap if you don't want the full art fancy version, right? And this is where trading card game developers or the companies have started to recognize this through creating those chase cards, through creating those alternate arts, and it does skew the market somewhat. Now, that utility value, how good that card is within the rules of the game, is fragile. It depends on a rule set. You change the rule set and the value can evaporate overnight. It depends on players. The opinions of 2 or 3 people can completely swing a market, right? The scarcity and the emotional value are more durable. They're tied to culture or nostalgia or kind of characters. So Charizard isn't going anywhere anytime soon. I always think about this in terms of relative to sports hobbies, right? And thinking about somebody like a Tiger Woods, thinking about somebody like a Wander Franco. Okay, if you know the stories, you know the stories. Okay, Charizard's not going to get done for sexual harassment anytime soon. Okay, neither is Darth Vader. Okay, because they're tied to these historical moments in the hobby and in culture. And that's not why every expensive trading card is truly collectible, and not every collectible card was ever playable. Okay, some cards are expensive because they're required to compete. Some cards are expensive because they matter to people. And the rare cases, the ones that really endure, can be those ones where those things overlap. Okay, but that overlap is far rarer than people assume. 30 years of playing has also taught me that something else that collectors sometimes underestimate is liquidity is part of that value. Okay, so a highly playable staple, even if it's temporary, is incredibly liquid. It sells immediately because competitive players need it immediately. They need it for this weekend. Okay, I can't tell you the amount of times where I've not been able to play a deck because I couldn't source a card when I realized I needed it on the Wednesday, but the tournament was on the Saturday and I can't get it. So a niche collectible might be expensive, but if only a narrow group of people care about it, selling can take time. Understanding who your buyer is and why they care matters more than the raw price tag. And this perspective has completely changed how I buy and sell. It completely underpins actually the entire new approach that I'm taking to things, muddying a little bit the buy what you love, but what other people love as well. So thinking about somebody like a Messi, buying Messi because I like Messi. So if they all went to 0, that's fine. But I also like Brentford. But I'm not buying Brentford cards because who's buying Brentford cards in the nicest possible way? Somebody's going to message me and say, I buy Brentford cards. Don't be such a jerk about it. If I'm buying for play, so take Star Wars Unlimited, for example, I assume these cards are going to depreciate in value. I treat it as a cost of participation. I don't buy boxes. I buy the absolute singles, the minimum amount of singles that I need to participate. I don't convince myself it's an investment. If it holds value, great, I guess. Like I basically, once I get a 4th copy of a card, I sell it. If it drops, that was always part of the deal. But if I'm buying for my collection, I'm asking a different question, which is, what is this going to look like 5 years from now? Okay, who's going to want this 5 years from now? Why are they going to want it? If the answer is because it was good in 2026, that's not a good enough reason. But if the answer is because this character defines an era or represents a pivotal moment in the culture, so again, thinking of somebody like a Charizard or an Eevee or a Lionel Messi, I'm thinking about the upcoming World Cup. Who's going to be iconic from that? Thinking in terms of those longer cycles. 30 years looking at something also makes you calmer. So when you've been through enough cycles, you stop chasing the hype. I'm still learning this lesson. But you stop panicking at spikes. I'm seeing this with Pokemon at the moment. A lot of people are still talking about the drop in Pokemon. It's not going to, it's not going to stay up forever. Okay, it's going to go down. It's going to come up. Crypto is the same way at the moment. Absolute sort of drop in crypto. It's February 2026. But you stop panicking at the spikes. You stop believing every surge is permanent, right? Competitive demand is loud but short-lived. Collector demand is quieter but more patient. Okay, when you understand how both sides of these work, you stop reacting emotionally to those price movements. You start to recognize patterns. You start to know when things rotate out. You start to recognize when things are likely to go down and up in value. Now, playing trading card games for 3 decades has not made me a perfect investor. Far from it. I've made loads of mistakes. I've held too long. I've sold too early. But it's taught me this. There is a difference between a good card and a good asset. Good cards win games. Good assets endure beyond the game. And the longer you stay in this hobby, the clearer that distinction becomes. That's what 30 years has taught me about card value. So a little bit of insight, I suppose, there from me from a trading card player's perspective. The Pokemon European Championships are on this morning. European Championships, European Internationals. So fascinating time, pre-rotation to watch some of these cards that are likely to drop in value or go up in value as print runs end, and they don't think about those kinds of things. There's no numbered cards, for example, in Pokemon. It's not a big thing. So thinking about that scarcity is super interesting, super important. So hopefully you've enjoyed a little bit of insight from me on that one. Continue to subscribe. Please share this with other people. Always happy to try and get the word out. Thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you again next week on Sean's Sports Cards.